Thanks, Nicole. Well, let's go ahead and get started with our accessibility at indoor arts events presentation. I'm Grace Carter. I'm the Associate Director of Community Impact at Arts Now. I work along with Nicole Mullet, who's our Executive Director, and we are the local arts and culture agency for Summit County. So we work to ensure that all of the artists and arts organizations in the sector are well-resourced and that our arts and culture sector is thriving. And I will pass it over to our presenters from Summit DD to introduce the organization and themselves.
Hi, I'll start. I'm Joan Bauer. I'm a community support specialist with Summit DD. I've been there for 20 years, lots of changes, and I support inclusion and accessibility in the community, which could be through training, an accessibility audit, design of a quiet space, information, finding resources, and many other things. Lynette?
Thanks, Joan. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Lynette Kleka. I'm an assistant director in your Summit DD's Community Sports and Development Department, and I work alongside Joan. We're excited to be here, and we really hope that you'll engage in this space with us, because we know while we have a lot of information to share, you are the experts in your field. So we'd love to learn from you, as well as hopefully you from us. Back to you, Joan.
Thank you, Lynette. So as you speak to our mission and our vision, how are we helping people of all abilities reach their full potential, one person at a time? And how are we making people feel included in the county? I do have a couple examples, and you can find these examples on our homepage, summitdd.org. Summit DD has a home modification initiative. So young children to aging seniors, hundreds of people, actually 400 referrals, can now access their homes safely and securely without barriers. And we also have an emerging leaders program. So this is born from the mission that Summit DD wants to help people reach their full potential. The program does prepare individuals to be able to step up to meaningful positions within the community, make their voices heard, share their unique perspective, and make a difference for things that they want to make a difference in. And it also aligns with the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities, their long-range goal to make sure that every county has a recruit on the board that has a developmental disability. So it's a fantastic program. They're on round 2, I believe, right now, and lots of individuals who are excited about this opportunity. There we are.
And we already had Lynette and Joan introduce themselves, so I'll introduce our statement of cultural equity from Arts Now, which is that the strength and future of Akron and Summit County reside in our ability to be an inclusive community where all people are acknowledged, welcomed, and respected. And our arts and cultural assets are a tribute to our individuality and shared humanity. Together, we will create a future where we inspire authentic learning, celebrate our uniqueness, and cultivate creativity. So as I mentioned before, Arts Now, the local arts and culture agency for Summit County, part of our mission is to ensure that the Akron Summit Cultural Plan is being carried out in our work and in our community. And from that cultural planning process, 10 key priorities came out of that plan. These are the priorities that were determined to be most important to the community members that were surveyed, with equity and accessibility being priorities 1 and 2. So with those priorities in mind of equity and access, the Arts and Culture Inclusion Council was created as an outcome of the cultural plan. So that is who is bringing this workshop to you today. The Inclusion Council is a volunteer group of individuals, community leaders who care about ensuring that the arts are inclusive, equitable, and accessible in Summit County. So if you're interested in learning more about the Inclusion Council, there's bios and information on our website. But we work together to put together workshops like this one. I also want to mention too, before I forget, that we'll have time for questions at the end, but we would love for you to participate, put questions in the chat. So just wanted to let you know we'll have time to have some discussion at the end. But with that, I will pass it over to Joan and Lynette to talk more about implementation of accessibility at our indoor events.
Thank you, Grace. We have a lot of information for you today. So if you don't get everything you need, please be sure you put it in the chat or save it for our question and answer session. And you can always reach out to Lynette or myself at Summit DD. So we know that inclusive events are designed so that we want to be able to have everyone participate and make sure that no one is excluded. So this plays into diversity and accessibility as the key role in these inclusive events. So what are some ways that you can work towards that? Well, you want to prioritize accessibility. So what does that look like, or what does that mean for your business? Well, you want to make sure that things are accessible via the venue itself, places that individuals may want to go, looking at your large spaces, your parking, your seating, lots of opportunities to check things out and decide if it needs to be accessible, how are we going to make that happen? Can we do that internally, or do we need external support with that? Being inclusive in your communication. So to make sure you have inclusive event communication, you want to be sure you have that language and the access to the communication. Be sure that it is provided in a respectful and that is acknowledged by all identities, backgrounds, and experiences. As we move further into this presentation, we'll also speak to how we're going to do signage and do font. So all those things will be included. But if you have questions, please be sure you ask. And setting up a quiet space. So again, thinking about when we go into places and we start to feel overwhelmed, if we're overwhelmed by noise, by things we see, by smells, what are we going to do? We can't leave the event. So lots of times we help people and assist them with setting up quiet spaces, or some people call them sensory spaces. And that's a place where anybody can go to find a place that they feel safe in and that they can get themselves together, get their calmness back, and then take the time to go back to the event and join. And we always want to remember removing those barriers. Do we have our staff prepped in what we want them to know, what we want them to share, how we want them to interact with everyone? And if we have volunteers for an event, what do we want them to know? Do we have directives set in place? Is there training that needs to take place? If you have internal support at your organization, you can start there and reach out. But if you're not sure about how to begin that process, then you can always reach out to us at Summit DD. There's also an accessibility library at the main library that you can go onto their website. And if you need help navigating that, we're going to talk about that a little bit later here in the workshop. And you can also go to ADA.gov, which is the American Disabilities Act. They have their own site, and they have more specific and items that you might need for yourself that are legal, rather than just things that you prefer to do and want to do to be that person that's helpful. So some of the projects that we've been involved with locally, we have supported and assisted with a quiet space set up and designed for the city of Akron with the mayoral inauguration. We worked with the Summit Art Space Art Walk, also helped them. And we were at the Geek Fest at the Akron Summit County Public Library. So all of them reached out for support with accessibility and with setting up a quiet space. I'm gonna set it over to Lynette right now.
There we go. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I have the privilege today of speaking with you on the topic of etiquette in social settings, which I believe actually is one of the most important topics we'll discuss today. And the reason being is because the greatest barrier to authentic, natural, rich, inclusive environments and experiences is attitudes and beliefs. From fears of saying the wrong thing to stereotyping and stigmatizing people based on perceived differences, people are still struggling today with fully opening their hearts and minds to welcoming all people into their events and programmings, even classes. So, as we delve into these topics, we're going to take topics one at a time. If we land in a space where maybe you haven't done so well at or you were not aware of, please take time to forgive yourself, and we're going to move on, because that was then and this is now, and we're ready to make great things happen in Summit County, because the truth is great things are already happening in Summit County. So here we go, some things to consider. The first is with your indoor events. Take time to relax and enjoy getting to know your vendors, patrons, your colleagues and guests as people and as professionals. And here's our first big ask is make sure you always ask before you help anyone at your events. Our implicit biases run deep, and we are also in a space where we love to help other people. But just because someone has a disability or it appears they have a disability doesn't mean they need your help. So you'll want to ask, and even beyond ask, you're going to want to ask them how they can help you and give them the autonomy to guide what that's going to look like. So there's number one, easy peasy, probably already doing it. So number two, we want to talk about speaking with people. So when you're speaking with a person with a disability, you want to make sure that you're focused on that person specifically, not necessarily their friends, their companions, aides, or if they have a sign language interpreter. And this can be hard for many of us, especially us Gen Xers. We were the ones who were raised to look people in the eye, and we expect people to look us in the eye when we're talking, and that might not happen. So we have to actively make sure that we are moving into a place that might be uncomfortable for us and focusing on the person and the intent of who we are speaking with. So sometimes it can take a couple times, you'll catch yourself, but we can do it because we need to do it. Everybody deserves to have that space and to be respected for who they are and the uniquenesses they bring into your events. So what about people who we're not sure whether they're going to be able to participate in activities? Well, I use people in general because the reality is we are all the best judge of what we can and cannot do. So it's important for us to resist making decisions for other people about what they can and cannot participate in. That can be hard too. So remember, we're all adults. We all, love to be autonomous in our decision making and whatnot. That extends to everyone. So I'd like to take it a little bit deeper now and definitely open it up for more conversation to hear what your experiences are and your thoughts are as we delve deeper. The first one I'd like to start with is terminology tips. You may have or may not have had heard of people first language and what that looks like. Does anybody want to talk about people first language, share their experience or what that might mean to you? I saw Nicole take her mute off.
Well, it's to confess, I can certainly remember doing it wrong, but making sure that we're talking about the person first as opposed to the disability or the group. But as I'm talking, I think I saw Carolyn put her hand up, so she may have a better response. Yes, Carolyn, please.
I mean, I don't think there's a better response or a right or wrong response. But certainly it's most important to follow how a group identifies themselves. And so it's more common from what I understand, among folks labeled with intellectual disabilities to prefer person first language because they're still not recognized as a group largely as having independent rights. But among other disabled groups that I work with more commonly, like autistic folks, for example, they tend to prefer identity first language. And so asking for someone's preference is most important. Throw that out there.
I love that. Thank you so much. And is it Janny? I took my glasses off, so I'm not reading small print very well. Janie or Janny? Oh, you have your mute on, just so you know.
I was on mute. Sorry, just talking nowhere. Anyway, so I'm going to present myself because as you can hear, I'm not from USA. I'm from Canada and the Acadian Peninsula in New Brunswick. So my first language is of course French, but still I'm bilingual, so I can understand both. And what's so amazing is that is I'm hearing impaired. So I have a cochlear implant and hearing aids. So I know I started to do artwork. What's really important in the community is really like, we don't need to be like hidden about what we are. You know, it's really, really important to show people who we are. So before I heard many people who said, don't say that you're hearing impaired, blah, 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 blah. It's not about that, no. But still, it's part of yourself. This is what makes me an artist. So right now with experiences, I'm not hiding anymore. So I just want to show myself, to show my voices. I speak several language and I'm traveling. I've been a big part of my life. Anyway, I have a long history. And yeah, it's really, really important to stay true to ourselves and to show who we are. Because this is what happens when people show who they are, their disabilities and things. It's what makes the community stronger. And to say, hey, we are here too. Yeah, it's not something to hide.
Yeah. And now you know why I really wanted to involve everyone in this conversation, because I never would have had those words.
Yeah.
That was spectacular. So thank you very much. And I think there's also that space too, is sometimes we focus so much on how I'm going to engage with another person. It's better if I just don't. There's nothing wrong with just saying hi. My name is, we feel like we've got to encompass everybody's identity in one conversation. And, I'm just here to enjoy this space along with you. So here we go. So I appreciate very much what you're sharing. And I think it's really important that we also identify that there are certain terms or words that we really want to stay away from. It's incredibly important. It's for all people, but it can really have a stronger impact on people with disability diagnosis. For example, wheelchair bound. A wheelchair is used as a mobility device to help a person get from one place to another place. So no one's bound to that chair. Are there can you think of any other words that we would like to and we need to stay away from? If we could literally forget them for the rest of our lives, that would be a beautiful thing, honestly. Yeah, Caroline?
I'll put a link in the chat of my favorite list of these by someone who's autistic and a lawyer, but handicapped, also handicap parking is just accessible parking. The R word, any use of mental illness as a form of metaphor. So that's crazy, that's nuts, that sort of thing. And I also just wanted to throw out there, if you want me to explain person versus identity language a little bit further, I'm happy to, if that's helpful.
Oh, you are most welcome to. Absolutely.
I think what Janine was getting at, the broader thing of it, where person first language, which is saying someone with a disability or someone who uses a mobility aid, comes from, was people not being recognized as people, and only their disability being seen, and that being seen before them. But now it's evolved a little bit further among certain groups that have gotten more recognition for being people. And among those groups, some prefer what's called identity first language, which is where someone is a disabled person or an autistic person instead of a person with a disability. And the idea there is that there's nothing wrong with disability. It's no more negative than, say, gender. And we use gender pretty commonly, a female person, for example, or race. And so the movement among identity first language folks is to try to destigmatize disability as something that is assumed to be bad or to subsume the entire identity of person. It's just one facet of their identity, in the same way that a female person is not only a female person, for example. But like I mentioned, among groups labeled with intellectual disabilities, because they're still not recognized as autonomous, person first language tends to be preferred more. I hope that helps.
Yes, I understand what you mean is that I know I have so many friends who have impaired, so to my places and elsewhere, and it's really things. And about hearing impaired also, what's so hard is like we understand, but sometimes we don't understand everything. So we need to have I would say the skills to have some help to improve the communications. Like for example, that you said about communication in French and English. So I know in English is more difficult because it was not my first language, but I have something amazing I have to show you. It's something on the Samsung who translate everything that you said to me, so I can follow while reading it. So I take notes. Like you said, Janie, I didn't heard that, but I saw that on my phone. It's amazing. Yeah.
That is amazing. And it's amazing how far technology has come to really help us all engage with each other in these events and in classes and things like that. It's a beautiful thing. And as we talk about connecting and connecting with people who identify as either deaf or having a hearing impairment, is also that opportunity to, if you ask a question and there seems to be some confusion in what you're asking or stating, try to restate it a different way. Just re-saying it over and over again does not necessarily going to bring clarity. So see if you can restate it in what you're asking. And since we're on kind of on that topic right now, what are some other great ways to better communicate and have conversations with people who do identify as deaf or hearing impaired? Anybody else or anybody have any thoughts? Hey, Heather.
Hello. I just recently, as in a couple months ago, went to a conference, and it was about the intersection of arts and accessibility. And one of the things that I took away always was to begin with asking the question, how would you like to communicate? Yeah. In other words, there are many different ways to accomplish this, and the more flexible that an organization or an individual can be in response to what that person says, the better. And so finding the way to meet that person in the way that they would like to communicate is the ideal. And I admit that we are at the very front end of this at Summit Art Space, but definitely that was a big takeaway that I took from those conversations.
Well, thank you so much, Heather, for bringing it. It was actually one of my bullet points. So rock on. So that was amazing. That was amazing. It's also, as Heather was talking about, opening up that conversation of how best are we going to be able to communicate with each other, it's also acknowledging, what do you do before you even start communicating? How do you gather that attention? And some of the suggestions are just maybe a brief little kind of wave, so somebody knows that you're getting ready to engage. Some people also will tap somebody, but I never try to do that because I never know if people want to be touched or not, so I'm always uncomfortable in that space, but that's sometimes something that you can do as well. And and you also have to remember that not all people who identify as deaf or hearing impaired can read sign language, speak through sign language. And some people can read lips and not. So we don't know. But if you are communicating, because we have a colleague whose spouse identifies as deaf, we always have to remind ourselves to stand in front of him, because we're so used to just sitting next to somebody and you start talking, but you need to make sure you're positioned so we can have some good conversation and everybody can be healthily involved in that. Let's jump to, how about individuals who utilize mobility devices to help them navigate, whether that's a wheelchair, a rollator, a cane. There are multiple different ways that people help themselves navigate through your environments. What are some ways that you have engaged with people in the past? I can get us started by one thing that I really strive to do all the time is get on eye level with somebody, which is not always as easy in an event because we're moving and navigating. So I'll often kneel down if I'm going to have a conversation with somebody, so they don't have to, constantly have their necks back. That can weigh on a person after a while. And it's also, you can tend to be left out of conversations simply because you are not on eye level. So that's one practice I do. What are some other thoughts?
What was the question?
The question is, with mobility devices, how can you, let me say, best practices to engage with somebody utilizing a mobility device? I can also offer, it's preferred not to lean or touch somebody's wheelchair or walker things. That's an extension of their support. So that is their space. Also, for anybody who's using things like crutches or walkers, it's real important that you not touch their arms and things like that, because they're using their arms as support and balance. So these are kind of, sometimes, we just go, hey, how you doing? And you tap somebody on their arm or things like that. Well, you want to try to refrain from doing that to help them stay engaged. And and so now let's move on to people who identify as blind or are visually impaired. For this particular space, it's really important that you identify yourself first at the beginning of a conversation. But beyond that, it's also really important that you identify the other people standing around you. Joan and I go a lot of places together, but that doesn't mean I'm always the one talking. But anybody in that room deserves to know that I'm standing next to Joan during that conversation. Any other thoughts about how we can best, and how you could best engage somebody who has a visual impairment or identifies as blind? I will share this. If somebody's using a service dog, it's really important that if you're walking with them or helping them guide and navigate through your event, that you stand on the side without the dog. Please don't place the dog in between you. Also, if somebody asks you to help them navigate to a certain space, you'll want to make sure that you lift your arm up and offer them your elbow. This provides them the autonomy to grab your arm on their own, and when they're ready to let go, they can do that themselves. We tend to want to help people, so we'll grab their arms and kind of pull them along. That's actually not helping. That's actually hindering their ability to navigate these spaces independently with you just as a guide and a support. Also, and this was a new one to me, and I thought this was really, really important. Orient people with visual impairments using numbers on the face of a clock. So you could say Joan's standing at 3 o'clock from you, or something like that. So I thought that was unique. Also, when you are giving directions, you need to give specific non-visual directions. So we can't say, hey, go down to the kettle corn. I love kettle corn. Head down to the kettle corn stand and you're going to turn left. You might want to say you're going to navigate forward. When you hit the carpet, you're going to want to turn, because that's a textile and you can actually feel that space. So those are definitely things to think about as you are scheduling and organizing. And I think Joan's going to talk a little bit more about that, your events. So I want to jump down because I know I am using up all of Joan's turns. I'm so sorry about that. I wanted to, because I brought up service animal, I wanted to talk about service animals with you. Now, the ADA does recognize a dog as a service support. For knowledge sake, just so you know, ADA law is you are not allowed to ask a person or their dog to not attend your event. They have just as much right to any public event as any other person. So with that, also is the knowledge that there is one other animal ADA identifies as a service animal. Does anybody else know what that other animal is? It is a miniature horse, believe it or not. And Joan, if I remember you sharing with me, Akron Children's actually has a miniature horse, Akron Children's Hospital.
That is correct. It's part of their doggy brigade, and I can't remember if it's a boy or a girl, but it's Petey or Penelope, but it is on their staff.
Yeah. So I think that's wonderful. And the one thing that I also learned about the horses years ago is that the miniature horses actually live longer and are smarter than dogs. So now, if you want to know the actual dimensions and whatnot, you can go to the ADA.gov website that Joan had mentioned before. It'll actually talk to you about the specific dimensions of what does that mean, miniature horse and whatnot. But there are a couple things to know as an event planner, and even, in your organizations and whatnot, is that, first of all, people who utilize service animals don't carry papers around with them. There's no such thing as, can I see your papers? That's a myth that circulates around. So no one needs to show papers, but you can ask people 2 questions. Does anybody know what those 2 questions are? Right, so you can ask them, is the dog a service animal required because of a disability? We are not permitted to ask what the disability is, and that's real important, but we are able to ask if it's required for a disability. And then you're also able to ask what the dog has been trained to do. So you are aware of that. So those are the 2 questions by ADA law that you are permitted to ask. But it's important to also know that if it is a dog that is not potty trained, if it's a dog that is having some very difficult behaviors and jerking away and jumping and stuff like that, you can ask that that dog be removed in that space. So when we talk about public spaces, where might the dog not be able to naturally be able to visit? And I I'll use, because we were just talking about Akron Children's Hospital, I'll use a hospital as an example. A service animal can go into the waiting room, can go into your doctor's appointment with you, and all those different spaces. Where a service animal would not be permitted is, let's say, in the surgical room, because of the cleanliness that needs to exist in that space. A service animal would not potentially be permitted in that space. So that's kind of that difference there. Sorry, I was just looking at the note. I can't quite read the whole thing. But with that, does anybody have any other questions or anything like that regarding best practices with engaging with people? If not, we will move back over to Joan, because I took up way too much time, Joan. I'm sorry, I told you I would.
Lynette,
wait,
you're
no.
up next.
I am next. I am so sorry. I am next. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So accessible art supplies and etiquette. So as you are planning your spaces, you may want to take time to create a creative art space at your events or things like that. And what might you add to that space to help it to become more enjoyable and welcoming to all people who attend? So first and foremost, we kind of look at those handheld spaces, such as paintbrushes and crayons and pencils and things like that. Some things that you can look at are what we call built up handles. So these are quick, low maintenance, easy to do. This is creating maybe a thicker pencil. So I've used clay before and molded clay around it, so a person can kind of fit their hand in there to help it fit. I've used Play-Doh. My go-to a lot of times is masking tape. I prefer masking tape over duct tape because masking tape is easier to get off if you want to take it off. But then you can build it up to make it easier for somebody to grip. So that's something to think about. There are also attachable grips. As you can see some of them in the picture there that really help people navigate utilizing those tools. And there is a really cool website you might want to check out. It's called Handy Things, and that's HANDI, then capital THINGS. It has an assortment of innovative products to support grips. They've got things that can help with your muscle tone, grips that have weights on them to help people. So a lot of really cool things on that website to check out. There's also in these spaces scissors. First of all, I did not know there were battery-operated scissors, but there are battery-operated scissors that really can provide ease to people who want to be able to cut their own art. There are also push-down tabletop scissors and loop scissors and hand-over-hand scissors. I've done the hand-over-hand scissors quite a lot in my experience, and that's where two people they have the spaces for two hands to actually help navigate. Think about tabletop easels. For those people who may use mobility devices and they can't get close enough to your standard easel, the tabletop allows them to move their wheelchairs up under the table for ease of access to the easel. Another one, I've done this for years, are raised outlines on canvases. This helps visually impaired painters maintain their spatial awareness, acting as borders, so they know where their outlining edges are. And this technique really allows them to feel those limits and extend out their work as much as possible. I often will use blue painter's tape, but I have used in the past also that it's a glue that I can put around, and so it has a small texture, but it also pulls up off the canvas when it was done. So those are some things I've used in the past. How about this? Scented paint. Have you ever thought about scenting your paint with different scents so people can identify color based on how they smell? And also bringing in textured paints. So when people are able to use those textured paints, you have that tactile that you can feel, and it will really enhance the perception through the artist's touch. So just some different elements. Does anybody else have any other suggestions or ideas? I know the accessibility library at the Akron Main Library also has some of these resources that you can see online and check out. Anything else? Caroline, yeah.
I just wanted to respond to the scented paints because I know quite a number of folks who have some very serious chemical and scent sensitivities. If that's going to be present, like if you're preparing that paint ahead of time, it's really important that that be advertised in your event description, because otherwise someone might show up in that space and have an adverse reaction and then be really in pain or have to leave right away. So I just wanted to temper that particular suggestion. Yeah, and if you are going to use scents and have been very clear about it, use natural scents, not chemical ones. And building on that, assuming you're in an art space, cleaning supplies, using just like vinegar is a lot of a safer bet than using store-bought cleaning supplies. That can, same with like scented hand soap in bathrooms, can be a barrier to folks. So just something to be considerate of.
Thank you. That was really important information, Caroline. I really appreciate you adding that. It's such an important topic. And there's also the topic when you're talking about cleaning supplies, because we do like to, in these COVID, days, we've upped our cleaning, is there are actually some people who don't have that sense of smell. So they can also be impacted because they're not able to sense these smells in advance. So thank you for bringing that up. All right, with that, I don't see any other hands raised. So Joan, I am going to toss it back to you.
Thank you, Lynette. Okay, so for your next slide, we're going to talk about this little flyer here. OTALI stands for the Ohio Center for Autism and Low Incidence. So this organization offers a variety of services and resources to support families, educators, and professionals who work with people with the ASD, autism spectrum disorder, and low incidence disabilities. There are many services and resources that they offer, and this includes online training, coaching, and professional development. And I know at one time Grace did have the link in there. So if we could put the link for that so people could navigate that, that would be helpful. Thank you. So what it stands for when you're looking to reach your audience in the community, again, it's as simple as ABC. So you want to be able to have that access, you want to have belonging, and both of those equal community. We move to the next slide, please. So the slide does break down. So as we talk about the first one with participants, speakers, and entertainment. So when we talk about sensory friendly, if you're not sure what that means, that maybe you open your event a little early to families. And for the first hour of the event, there's less people. It's a little bit quieter. There's no music playing. And individuals will have an opportunity to be at the event and do the things they want to do before everyone else gets there. Also, if you're looking to hire an ASL interpreter, where are the services in your local area? Here, for us in Summit County, we utilize Greenleaf Families Center's Community Services for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. They offer interpreting services, advocacy, education for the people who are deaf, deafblind, hard of hearing, or losing their hearing. And be sure too, when you're in an event, that you have many options for people to participate. So again, if you have closed or open captions, if you're having videos or films or presentations. If we move on to the space, thinking about those quiet spaces, sensory friendly spaces that we discussed earlier. Again, what does that look like? Those are places for people to go and have an opportunity to calm themselves down, feel better about where they're at, feel their place in space, and then go back and join the activity. If you're not sure how to do that, it can be very simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. Lighting and sound adjustments, again, those sensitivities for people. Pre-event assessment and recommendations. So again, before we set up those spaces, thinking about the rooms that we could have those in, what are some things that we need for those spaces? You don't need a lot, but where's the location going to be? I know in some of the spaces when we did the art space, at some art space, Heather was very good about thinking about where she wanted it. So we took a walkthrough and she looked at her spaces and decided what space would be the best space for it. And then we worked together to help design that space and decide what would be in it. And lots of times we do those spaces, we want to make sure that we're helping support people in those spaces that aren't sure what those supports look like or how to utilize the items that are being put in those spaces. And again, removing those barriers, make sure there are accessible routes to navigate those spaces. If you're having an art event, is there room for people utilizing wheelchairs to move around the space between the displays and the exhibits? Okay. And if there are ramps into the building, are there ramps maybe needed in other spaces that you could get some portable ramps? Caroline, did you have a comment real quick?
Yeah, and again, feel free to stop me anytime because I'm not part of this organization.
You're okay. We appreciate it.
But another thing to think about in terms of space and wayfinding a signage, it can be very confusing for neurodivergent folks in a new space to find their way from, say, the bathroom back to the main area, or like same in a conference area. There's often signs that direct you like to the bathroom or to the main event, but not between them or from them. And so that's very helpful as well.
And I appreciate that because you're right on top of it the next section, you are so fun. It's wonderful. I appreciate this. Right. And then for your staffs and volunteers and partners, again, are you giving them the pre-event information that they need? Are you having informational sessions to discuss what that support looks like? And training. Make sure that people who are participating are trained in including on how they're going to assist attendees and help people with accessible needs. And then we're coming to Caroline's for the promotion in the informational section. So do you have alternate printed materials? Please make them available upon request. Your marketing materials. All right. There are a couple of fonts that are recommended through ADA, and it's Sans Serif font, which is the Arial, the Calibri, and the Tahoma. And again, no smaller than 14. And are there going to be Braille materials available if needed? And are you asking ahead of time or having attendees let you know ahead of time that they're going to need those? And as Caroline spoke to, those event maps and directional signage, we need those for navigation for the event space, for parking, restrooms, quiet spaces. You can have those displayed in the venue. You can have them made into hard copies to pass out, and you can have them online on your website before the event. Right. And as far as parking goes, did you know that according to the ADA, events should have one accessible parking space for every 25 total parking spaces, and at least one of those spaces must be able to accommodate a van? Caroline, do you have another question, hon? Okay. So we're going to talk about the accessibility library on this one, Nicole and Grace. So I'll start with, there we go. Okay.
Yeah.
The accessibility library, you're jumping. I wasn't sure. All right. So we've spoken a lot about the accessibility library. Okay. So this was identified in the Akron Summit Cultural Plan, which originated with the artist and advocate Alicia Hopkins. There was a thoughtful implementation of a process by which nonprofit community groups could access assistive technology and support items for events, and it's been carried forward by the following organizations: So the Akron Summit County Public Library, Advancing Independence, Arts Now, Direction Home, and Summit DD. So here in Summit County, where we live, the accessible library can be found at the main library in the cultural and AV department. That's where the physical items are housed. Right? Items are provided for checkout, just using your library card, and support is provided as well through all the stages of the planning. So in this library, if you go to the website and just go to accessibility, you can download checklists, and it goes through all of the things we've just been talking about for indoor and outdoor events. You can request support from partners. So this entails reviewing your venue site, making recommendations on how to increase the enjoyment for all your guests. You can watch videos that are geared towards supporting you and your team. And you can even make some support gear. And you can review the catalog of the physical items that you can borrow. There's also a loan closet by Advancing Independent Network. It's also housed on that page, but not exactly in the library. So through this agency, you could get portable ramps. You can access screen and room dividers, card tables, ADA sound kits to accommodate hearing accessibility in large venues, assistive listening systems. You can get accessible parking signs, and all you have to do is contact the gentleman whose name is listed in there, John Ballard, and he will get those items together for you and deliver them and pick them up. Now, if you do want support, all you have to do is fill out the form on that page, and it will be sent directly to a contact person who is me, and I can help you out with that. Okay. So what are some tips for working around these challenges at indoor venues? So some common accessibility challenges would include any barrier that makes it difficult or impossible for a person with a disability to equally access, navigate, or engage the indoor venue. So if you start with physical, that could include making sure that you have ramps, elevators, and wide doorways. Make sure they're available. Check your pathways for obstructions, ensure there's enough space for those mobility devices. Accessible toilets and amenities should be available and clearly marked. For seating arrangements, spaces should be reserved for attendees with wheelchairs, and seating should be easily moved to accommodate the various needs. Again, those accessibility maps. They're not hard to make. If you have somebody who's done it before, or you just figure it out on your own, it really is very simple and it's very helpful. We've used them in a lot of the events that we've helped support, and people are just so happy that they have that. So just recommend that you provide the map of the venue with accessible routes and the facility clearly marked. This could be on an event app, displayed in the venue itself, or again, we talked about printing them off so attendees could physically have them in their hands. Please include them in the email communications as well. And for safe spaces, offer a quiet space on site, overseen by professionals to assist those who might be overwhelmed by sensory simulation at events. Again, you don't have to be trained, but you have to have some idea of how to support individuals that might be utilizing the spaces. So it is vital that event organizers look to feedback from attendees. So make sure that your event was welcoming, and make sure you're gathering feedback. You could use surveys, focus groups, interviews with people about their experiences, or ask them to fill out a quick survey about the event experience. We've had surveys, we use them at the Summit Art Space about using the headphones that were provided in the space, and a lot of people filled them out. That way we were able to collect data for that as well, just to see, if we're doing what is needed, or if we need to improve or do less of something. And implementing changes. Again, we're always thinking about lessons learned. Once you've gathered your feedback, make necessary adjustments and ensure that you communicate these changes to attendees for future events. Again, thinking about who you're going to request support from, And planning an inclusive event is not just about checking on the boxes. It's about creating an environment where everyone feels valued, heard, and accommodated. So accessibility and inclusion do not happen overnight. I think we all know that. But if we try to follow these guidelines, you are well on your way to hosting an event that truly is welcoming to everyone. And again, a support for one is a support for all. Yes, Caroline.
I just wanted to highlight Chris has been sharing some things in the chat that they would really strongly like voiced, which is that a huge part of making events accessible in this day and age is being aware of COVID and taking mitigating measures. We know that disabled people are disproportionately affected and affected severely by COVID. And so it's just a topic that hasn't been included thus far. And so things like offering face masks, making masks mandatory, making sure there's proper ventilation, filters, and being upfront about with that information in your event accessibility statement so that people are aware is key.
Yes, and I think we've kind of gotten away from that. So thank you for that reminder.
If I missed anything, just shoot me a message.
And thanks for sharing that. It's hard to look at that or hear about if you're presenting. So we do appreciate that so much. Thank you. So here we come to Real Abilities Film Festival. Is there anyone that's heard of this festival before? Oh, you have. Wonderful. Okay.
It's in Toronto as well.
Okay, yes. So the Real Abilities Film Festival is the largest festival in the USA. It's dedicated to promoting awareness and appreciation of the lives, stories, and artistic expressions of people with disabilities. It was founded in New York City in 2007, and it presents international and award-winning films by and about people with disabilities in multiple locations throughout each hosting city. So what we do is we have post-screening discussions and other engaging programs together so that the community can explore, discuss, embrace, and celebrate the diversity of our shared human experience. This event will take place here in our Summit County area and November 9th on a Saturday at the main library, which is 60 South High Street from 1 to 4:30. As the slide shows, there's going to be a reception with music by Hearts for Music. There will be an art gallery show in the atrium, and the accessibility library collection will be on display there. So if you have not had an opportunity to see any of that yet, you can explore it and look at it and think about what you might want to utilize in the future. So we're hoping you'll share this information, check it out on the websites, and possibly attend the event if you can, or share with whoever you can. We appreciate it. Anything else on that, Lynette?
You got it covered. Thank you, Joan.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Joan and Lynette. It looks like we're a few minutes over time, so if anybody has to hop off to get back to work or get to another meeting, we're so glad you could join us today. But I think as long as our presenters are okay, if we want to stick around maybe for 5 to 10 more minutes, just in case there are any other questions, since we didn't get to the Q&A, that could we hang out for
Grace, I think that's a great plan, and I'm gonna go ahead and pause the recording. So if you're more comfortable coming off of having your screen hidden or you want to ask a question, then we'll go ahead and pause the recording. So for the folks who are viewing this later on, thank you so much for being with us today.
And I'll go ahead and take the slides down.